Michael, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Jamie.
Although
Always a pleasure.
we've been catching up for like an hour because it's so fun to talk about everything that's happening in the industry.
Yep, it is.
So we're going to talk about management agreements, as I like to do with you. So you and I both were guests on the Office R&D Flex World Conference, which was a few weeks ago now.
Yep.
Yeah. So you talked about management agreements, and I got to kick off and talked about how everything's changing, the new rules of engagement. And one of the sort of things you should question is your real estate structure. So there are, and I'm curious, I have so many questions for you. We're going to talk about what's happening out there in terms of creative partnerships, creative agreements. They might be a management agreement, might be a rev share, how to get them, how to identify them, kind of an update, because you and I chat about this. You've been on before. We'll put the links to our other episodes in the show notes. And we should mention, we have done a course together called Creative Coworking Partnerships. And we're kicking off our next cohort January 13th. And we like to do cohorts because we like the groups. You can learn from what other folks are going through. We have folks in the cohort now who are working through deals and asking great questions. But we'll put the link in the show notes because you can join anytime. But our next live cohort will kick off January 13th, 2022. We're getting there. Totally. Okay. So one question that I had for you, which is maybe starting in the middle, is it a good time to be thinking about a management agreement, or is it a good time to get a deal on a lease?
Good question, Jamie. So there's no simple answer to
Okay.
that. It obviously has
It
to do with the
depends. Are you gonna say it
operator,
depends?
what their experience is. But look, let's face it. There's more landlords that are now intrigued about co-working and flex office. There are operators out there that are doing extremely well and they want to expand. And the third component, probably the most important component that's driving this demand, it's the companies and it's the occupiers of the space. And so that's what's forcing landlords to think twice, three times about the value of that long-term lease. So there's so much activity now, but as you and I both know, and we discuss this all the time, it's finding the landlords that, number one, are willing to engage, whether it's an operator, whether it's a broker, whether it's just they want to embrace it, they want to learn about it. And then, we have the other conversation, which I've heard on your other podcasts, about the brokerage community, because initially the brokerage community, like, they felt alienated, like they weren't invited to the party. But in reality, we know that they're working hard to bring in deals, especially enterprise clients. Look, we know that recently WeWork engaged JLL to do their leasing, to help them on leasing. So it's clear that, there is an opportunity for the brokerage community, but like everything else going on, it's new. So people have to understand, while you and I know it because we live it 24/7, not everybody else knows flex and what it offers. And that's, to me, that's the challenge. It's getting out there and getting noticed, whether it's about a brand, it's really about education more than anything. And I see this transition is going to happen between now and 2022. And most recently, somebody asked me, so where are we in the process? I said, I'd say we're in the top of the second inning. We're already at Flex 3.0. It's evolving. But at the same time, there is so much more growth and opportunity out there. We literally have just skimmed the surface. Like, Jamie, what would you say? Maybe 2% of the office market is flex?
Yeah,
not even that much.
No, that is the like national or North America, it might include Canada average. it's higher in
Yep.
some major markets. It's 2%. Yeah, I mentioned the ULI group that I spoke to recently, and Jim Hyde. We're gonna have Jim Hyde on the podcast in the next few weeks, but I gave them that stat. It's so small still, but the awareness, and I mentioned you in our pre-chat that I was talking to Sam Rosen from Desk Pass, and he said they're getting leads from occupiers who are just Googling. And he's like, exactly to your point, they don't know all the things that we know. Like they just, they're sort of finding solutions on Google and they're investigating. There's still so much education to be done. So wait, so back to my question about the lease before we go. Do you think, and it relates to your comment about the inning that we're in, I wonder, are we still very early stages around good lease deals? Because there are so many occupiers that are still in leases that maybe they'd like to give up, but the lease isn't up for 3 years. So commercial occupancy is sort of inflated or sort of not reflecting what it might look like as leases start to come up and folks look for alternatives.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's not only the vacancy, there's a sublet market out there.
Yeah. And sublets can be tricky. If I'm trying to open a co-working space, I don't know if I want sublet space. It'd have to be like move in ready, because the economics are tricky. Unless do you think a landlord with sublet space is a good opportunity to convert to a management agreement?
It is. A lot of it will depend on how long is the term left on the sublease agreement. And if you can work out a deal with the landlord, knowing that when it comes up, you can continue to operate in that space.
Yeah.
Look, at the end of the day, landlords do what they feel comfortable doing, and that is long-term leases. And, during the pandemic, we were exposed to the vulnerability of flex operators signing long-term leases. But at the same time, landlords were dealing with these traditional leases from occupiers, and it was not flex operators, but typical tenants, and they were defaulting as well.
Right.
So, don't just blame it on the flex operators. It's really the office sector is going through a transition right now. And it's clear you can't make broad statements about any given market because, I can go into whether it's downtown Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, New York, San Francisco, Chicago, keep naming the major cities. And while everyone who got into flex from the beginning, they all focused on the urban cores for obvious reasons. And now with remote work and a lot of companies embracing hybrid work schedules, now all of a sudden, people don't want to take that long commute into the city. Now everyone wants to be closer to home, as we now label the 15-minute city. Everybody wants to be in the suburbs, or better yet, we have great small towns. It doesn't matter whether you're in Columbus, Ohio, or Richmond, Virginia. The commute time is nominal, and people will go down there because it's easy and it's accessible. And these areas are now booming throughout the country. I mean, so, look at what's transpired in out of all places, Bozeman, Montana. And people, now that people are working remotely, they love that quality of life. And in the suburbs, people are, they're signing up deals left and right, private offices, open desks.
Yeah.
I'm seeing
so, but if I'm a co-working operator looking to expand and I'm interested in doing a creative partnership with a landlord, are the landlords in the suburbs open to deals, or is there so little? I mean, are they struggling to fill their space, or is there we're still so close to the pandemic. We're not, we're not really,
we are
far out from it.
We are.
And my initial thought, I think about the students in our course And it feels like we're getting folks who are doing deals who are in smaller markets, more entrepreneurial landlords. And yet I think we're all more optimistic about smaller markets than CBDs, but the CBD is where there's vacancy. So if I'm an operator looking to expand, where am I going? Is it easier for me to get a creative deal outside of a CBD because there's more entrepreneurial landlords, or are they doing okay on their own and not looking for opportunities?
So if you happen to be an operator and you have one location and you're doing rather well, you can clearly parlay that success in that same geographical region with a landlord. But to your point, just because you're in the suburbs, does that mean that that landlord is going to be more open to it? Right off the bat, I would say the answer is no. However, I think with what has transpired, landlords and their internal teams, clearly now they get it, they understand it. They're asking questions. They haven't embraced it yet. Not everyone's embraced
We're
it.
still early in the change management process.
It is. It is.
Landlords,
But,
yeah.
But it's not the landlord or the operator that's driving the demand. And I think everyone needs to understand that. It's the occupier.
Yeah.
And now the occupiers want flexibility. And not only do they want flexibility, they want a better workplace experience. And I've always told you, having been a developer and a landlord in the retail world, we saw this change occur over a 15-year period on how consumers buy products. So now, fast forward to today, and the pandemic has clearly accelerated this process. Now we're looking at how we will work in the future. And, you and I spoke beforehand. We had almost 6% of our workforce leave their current jobs. They vacated their jobs in September and October. And people don't want to make that long commute. They're shifting jobs where their new employers will embrace a hybrid work schedule. They are willing to work longer hours, but under their terms.
So I saw, maybe it was a LinkedIn post. It was about LinkedIn saying that I think if you're looking for a job on LinkedIn, you can set a preference in your profile about, right, whether you're willing to, maybe you posted it, work remotely or, so just that mindset is shifting. So, which sort of leads us to your point about landlords being open to creative partnerships. You started to say before we hit record, your conversation with a landlord, their preference is a 10-year lease.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. They because that's what they know about value. Whether their exit strategy is to sell it or whether they're to refinance it, they're thinking about, how do I establish value? What a lot of landlords don't know, and I don't know why they don't know this, but many landlords have refinanced with flex office. They've sold buildings with flex office. Underwriters and lenders today are so much up to speed from the technology to the business platform, and they're not discounting flex because of its short-term nature. It's similar to hotels and apartments. They're giving it dollar for dollar.
I think that's more the case, but still challenging. I still have operators who say they can't get an SBA loan because they think it's passive income. There's still, and
to a certain extent, it's only passive income to the landlord. It's not passive income
to the operator. No, everybody listening is like, heck no, it's not. There's nothing passive about this business for sure.
And part of the issue with landlords is understanding that it is a business, and that that business has people that work there. There's events there. I mean, think about it.
From the
I had this
perspective of
conversation.
doing it on their own or partnering and everything.
Well,
Yeah, that's
like
involved.
I had this conversation recently with another landlord, and most of their buildings, they don't have enterprise groups. They have small tenants, whether it's accounting, lawyers, media, consulting, real estate companies. And I said, imagine a floor. This guy had his group had 30,000 square foot floor plates. I said, when you accommodate each one, if there are 20 companies on this floor, that means you're doing 20 different kitchenettes. You have demising walls. I said, think about a space.
And the meeting rooms and
right,
right?
Take down the walls.
So inefficient. Yeah.
I mean,
yep.
like if it was built today, you could fill those spaces up. Like you could create a community, and you know what? Occupiers love the engagement with other groups.
Yep. Yeah.
And on top of that, the way the pricing model is, landlords benefit significantly with greater value, and you can get those same tenants in at less cost.
Because even a spec suite, to your point,
yep.
It's just like repeating kitchenette, meeting room, workspace, kitchenette. Yep. It's so inefficient.
Inefficient. Yep. And when you centralize it, I mean, think about it. Like you have the central cafe. It's almost like you have a small restaurant within the space, and you have events there, and you can satisfy catering events and things like that. And it just, so many landlords, they don't get it yet, and they will. I think it takes time. And I have to say this, because we went through this and we are still going through this in our country. There's a lot of misinformation about the flex industry and how it works and how landlords can benefit, how brokers can get involved, and how operators can expand. And, this is the downside of social media and the various platforms, but I do believe there's got to be a platform where whether you're an operator, whether you're a broker, whether you're a landlord, so they can go to, whether it's through the industry associations, but there needs to be a reliable source of information, because I think that's part of the problem right now. Is there's too much content, some of it good, some of it not so good. We discuss about, there's so many different software management programs out there. The great thing that we know is so few buildings, such a small percentage, has flex in it. And landlords, they haven't figured out that flex, it doesn't compete with traditional leases. It complements traditional leases, and it literally reactivates a building. I mean, you talk about bringing people in. People it's the source of income. They need to eat, they need to work, they need to sleep, they need to congregate. And they love events, and they love engagement. We're a creature of that.
Yes and no. Anybody listening will say, wait, only 20% of my members actually come to my events. So they love access to, and they love the optionality of what's happening in a space. Yeah,
they do. And you're right. Not every not every member wants that engagement. Yeah. They just want to do their work and leave. But that's the great thing about Flex Office.
It's aspirational. I mentioned there was a woman that I met at the ULI event, and she has a space in a larger commercial setting that has a bar. And she said she always tours prospective tenants through the space, and they see the bar and they picture themselves in it. I think it opens onto a rooftop deck. They picture themselves having these great happy hours with their teams. And she's like, they may never do it, but they love the idea of it. Right. And it's so compelling. Yep. And she said it makes such a huge difference on her tour for other tenants in the building. So I'm wondering if what you're saying is landlords are understanding that the world is changing. They still prefer a 10-year lease, But you said your question to them is, how likely is that to happen? And so they had to get real about that, but they still don't necessarily understand the model and how to actually execute or how to partner, which is,
Yep.
yes, we're trying to help with that. We have some landlords that have enrolled in our course.
Yep.
So they're, we help them get kind of really into the weeds on what it looks like to partner, what it looks like to run the model. But there's still a lot of education to be done. And one thing I see in our course is that folks who are getting things done pretty quickly are doing it with a landlord that they already have a relationship with.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And
but you're
look,
working on other deals. So you mentioned one, we won't mention names. Is it a landlord that they had a relationship with, or was it sort of a cold relationship?
no, it was cold because the existing operator has a lease that's expiring. And one thing that we are seeing that a lot of operators are aware of is there's a lot of former flex spaces that are sitting vacant. Former Regis spaces. I'm working on where we're taking a Regis space over, and converting a Regis space to a modern day workplace experience. It's not the easiest task. However, the caveat is we can transform a space into, the 2022 version of Flex 3.0. It's got existing demising walls, so we can reduce the CapEx expenditure and transform that space. So to me, that's the most exciting thing out there. But look, in Washington, D.C., there's one landlord who lost WeWork as a tenant, and they decided, after they realized the risk and the loss, they picked up the pieces and they created their own brand. They get to start a brand with 3 spaces already fitted out. So, they could have gone the other way and brought in another operator, but they decided to do it themselves. And they created a team to do it internally, which to me is great. And as long as you understand the business model, the lead generation, to the IT component, to all the other various factors, that's, to me, that's great. But not every landlord gets to take over a vacant WeWork space.
Yeah, right. Not very many. So
yeah.
The deal you mentioned with the group that with the lease expiring, they're shifting into a management agreement. Is that space an existing flex space, or are they doing a fresh build out?
We're doing it's an existing, well, it's a former Regis location.
Okay.
So yes, there will be a new fit out, new cafe area, quite large, and really, bringing in a new design team and a totally new workplace experience that provides all flexibility from small users to teams, the conference facility, the whole 9 yards.
Hey, I just wanted to jump in really quickly before we continue with our discussion. If you're working on opening a co-working space, I want to invite you to join me for my free masterclass, 3 behind-the-scenes secrets to opening a co-working space. If you're working on opening a co-working space, I want to share the 3 decisions that I've seen successful operators make when they're creating their co-working business. The masterclass is totally free. It's about an hour. It includes some Q&A. If you'd like to join me, you can register at everythingcoworking.com/masterclass. If you already have a co-working space, I want to make sure you know about Community Manager University. Community Manager University is a training and development platform for community managers, and it can be for owner operators. It has content, training, resources, templates from day one to general manager. The platform includes mini courses that cover the major buckets of the community manager role, from community management, operations, sales and marketing, finance, and leadership. The content is laid out in a graduated learning path, so the community manager can identify what content is most relevant to them depending on their experience and kind of jump in from there. We provide a live brand new training every single month for the community manager group. We also host a live Q&A call every single month so that the community managers can work through any challenges that they're having or opportunities, get ideas from other community managers, build their own peer network. We also have a private Slack group for the group. So if you're interested in learning more, you can go to everythingcoworking.com/community manager. So in terms of identifying that landlord, were they kind of on the lookout for, oh, that Regis is going out, I'm going to go find the landlord and have a conversation? What did that process look like?
So Regis had already left. They had several locations in the city. They left a few of the locations. This one, they happened to be there. And this is great news for everybody out there. Regis operated that space for over 30 years. Yeah. So to me, obviously, having Regis in almost any market, it's like it justifies.
It validates. I know we talked in our pre-chat about somebody who had opened in a market with no Regis, and I said that sounds like a bad idea.
But look, look, at the end of the day,
I mean, a bigger market, right? I mean, Regis is not in every market, but they do a significant site selection process, so they've validated demand. Yeah.
Yep, they do, and they do it well. And like we chatted earlier, depending on what market you're in, it's possible that at the end of the day, a long-term lease might provide that arbitrage.
Yep.
But the risk is different, and operators need to understand that risk. And landlords clearly understand the risk because they always want, for the most part, skin in the game. And that skin in the game comes from a variety of different levels. But at the end of the day, you still have to overachieve market rents.
So I'm curious, the Regis takeover, the operator, I'm assuming it was an underperforming Regis, and that's why it closed.
I would suspect yes.
So this operator with the lease expiring, that's going to take over the Regis location, they think they can outperform.
So one of the reasons why this operator wanted to relocate is because the space that they've been in, and by the way, they were operating in their current location for 20 years. So their lease was expiring. The space is small. Their space doesn't have the community space or the collaboration spaces that we are accustomed to seeing in today's flex office locations. So for them, it's an upgrade, but it enables them to take their business model to another level. And because this building that we're relocating to, it's a better location, larger floor plates. Ironically, it has significantly greater vacancy. So I see the opportunity, if they are successful, they can potentially expand to another floor.
So why did it not work for Regis?
I'm guessing it was old and tired, and they probably did, because of what transpired during the pandemic. They probably saw other locations within the market that were stronger from a long-term standpoint.
So they're optimizing, but this new operator is going to take advantage. So the landlord's supporting some update.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's the interesting opportunity here. It's like there was so much baggage for one operator that they sort of said, we're going to let this go. But another operator could come in and sort of start fresh with the landlord and say, okay, let's put an investment in. Here's what we think we can achieve, and sort of start over and have access to that TI. Whereas the tenant that was in there before, for better or worse, just can't get that out of the existing landlord, and they have to leave. And so we may have operators who are unfortunately in the we have to leave camp, and somebody else is going to come in and sort of start over, the new girlfriend, or the, get the attention and the investment and all those things, which so there are some winners and losers. So that's an interesting, but we always talk about, like, how do you identify landlords that are open-minded? And it's
right.
Okay,
So,
well, look around who's going out of business and where's their space, because for that landlord to convert that location is a major investment if they wanted to create it for another use case.
so
And they
here's
may just not have the taker. 20, you said, 20,000 plus square feet. Who's taking that right now? Not a lot of demand for that.
so here's the interesting phenomenon, even for all independent operators out there. Their first location, for the most part, I'd say 95%, tell me if I'm wrong, probably have signed a lease in their first location.
Yeah.
And, the first thing I ask is, how many conversations have you had with your landlord? And they all say little or none.
As few as possible.
Right, exactly. So, and I say, have you reached out to your landlord? They said they're scared to death of the landlord because the landlord's like this big bad bully.
100%.
Yeah. And
yeah,
so,
the landlord's got the piece of paper with the personal guarantee on it. They're very
right,
intimidating.
right. And
Yeah.
I said, look, but you need to have that conversation. Like, you need to reach out with the landlord and say, hey, this is what I'm doing. Because if every independent operator, at least that I have worked with recently over the last 6 months, have all told me we're now profitable, we're making money, we are growing, our leads are coming in, we're completely filled up. We need more space. I said, so what are you doing to accommodate that demand? Well, we're looking for another location. I said, but maybe that location is under your nose. Maybe it's in the building.
Yeah.
And like, oh, I didn't think about that. I go, you have a landlord. I go, imagine if you could provide additional income to the landlord. Why wouldn't he consider that? Like, what if you had members that wanted to grow and you can't accommodate them, but oh, maybe somewhere they could be accommodated somewhere else in the building. Like, everybody wins at that game.
Yeah, I mean, you and I talked about this too. I have members who are doing this. They're getting leads for larger requirements.
Yep.
And they can't accommodate that in the space that they have. And it's riskier to go take on a lease, to do team suites or to do 20 person requirements, right? What if it doesn't fill up? But if you have the lead in hand,
yep,
you own it. You own that lead. And so you can go do the deal with the landlord and do a rev share for X number of years. You need the occupier to commit, right? But they might commit for a year or two, and the landlord can do that. And we talked about the fact that oftentimes those larger requirements don't need 30 offices.
Right.
They need team space with some meeting rooms, with some private space, with some phone rooms. And you can do that, and you can give them the meeting rooms, the event space, the whatever, with your existing space in the building, which is a huge advantage. Yeah.
Huge advantage. And so many people just, they don't even think about that. It doesn't even come in their thought process.
Yeah. I think because operators think of expansion as like, I need a new footprint elsewhere.
Right. Right. And so here's the other dilemma that people don't necessarily talk about. It's the timing issue.
Yeah.
It's like when a member comes to you, like,
Yep.
they need it now.
Right.
Well, guess what? There's nothing available now. And in order to engage from the landlord to the operator to the occupier, it takes time. So it's really about landlords with vacant space. Like, instead of the space just sitting vacant, like, create that flex right away.
Yep.
Like,
totally.
It really doesn't.
And again,
make sense.
there are buildings, because you and I, there are operators whose buildings are at 100%. There's no space to expand. Yep. But if you're in a building that's not there, your landlord is probably not getting leads, but you are.
Yep.
And if you were a little scrappy about it, you could, talk to the landlord. Is he open-minded? Is she open-minded? And then go after some of these larger requirements that you would never have thought to go after because you don't have room for 20 people.
That's right.
And you could do it on a ref share basis. So there's no risk to you. You just handle the contracting. It's as if you're sort of broker operator.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, you and I are seeing this, all over the country. As a matter of fact, you take it to the next level And it's like landlords are now dealing with this increased operating expenses on every line item, because of supply chain and inflation, like everyone's trying to get ahead of it. And the answer for the landlord is right under their nose. And they don't see it, and the operators don't see it. And it's up to us to make that connection for them and try to find that language, that middle ground that everyone understands, where you're creating value for the landlord and you're accommodating flexibility for all the occupiers. It's great, but not a lot of people are doing it. And it's really it's the education. It's about the understanding of the elements and the business model. And I think we're going to see more happening in 2022. I think we're going to see this huge surge in demand. My only caveat to everything that we're saying, I think it's the obvious that nobody's talking about, but it's happening in Europe, is there's another surge going on. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news.
Don't say it. Earmuffs.
Yeah. I mean, so the irony of that is, what that would do, it would only increase the need for future hybrid work schedule and increase the demand for flex. And so that's why I think there is such a high demand, because time and time again, we are able to, in every single one of our locations, as long as it's the right size, we can overachieve market rents through flex office. It's not as simple as it sounds, but the platform just makes so much. It makes so much sense. Look, I have to, I got to compliment the guys that are out there that are leaders of the industry, from Expansive, who started as, God, what was their name?
Level.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, they own the asset, and they have the flex, and they can accommodate enterprise groups. And, I mean, it's not easy to do. It's a different capital structure, but it's about controlling that destiny of the occupants. When we talk about the creative partnerships, it's a true partnership. It's, every landlord's like, I want to convert the management to a lease. And I said, why? And it's like, well, I want to be able to finance the building, or I want to sell the building.
No, I love when you mentioned that. You were like, well, it's kind of a weird thing. They think they want to convert it to a lease, which it's like hardwiring for them, right? Because you look at the numbers, to your point, there's a formula, and when it works, it works.
Yep.
And you can achieve above market returns. And if the landlord's looking at that rationally, you think, why on earth would you want to convert it to a lease and reduce your cash flow? But it's so hardwired that must have lease to, and the banks and that'll be that will shift over time, but it's still,
it will. And slowly the institutional clientele, from the publicly held companies to, the major insurance companies that own a lot of real estate throughout the country, they're slowly getting it, and they understand it. And it will be a transformation for the office industry, because the clear need for this whole workplace experience, it's about hospitality, it's about the community, it's all the buzzwords that we talk about. But when you look at this synergy of all the components, it's greater than a traditional lease. And that, that's the word that's got to get out there. The traditional lease, it's flatline, and it works until it's not working. We saw what transpired with the pandemic. clearly the flex operators were vulnerable too. But if you have a management deal, you don't have to deal with that unwinding. It's
Yep.
still there. If you're in the suburbs and you have, we have another surge, we've gotten used to this to the point where, landlords and operators are becoming more and more accustomed of security, safety, health concerns. And, it's been a tough road, but we've learned a great deal. And having private offices will, it helps the whole equation even better.
It helps the whole equation. And the easiest way to do that is through a partnership with the landlord where they're footing the capital investment, because that's always the trade-off. The model looks really good with more private space, but it's expensive to build.
Look, I mean, there's so many different investment objectives that landlords are considering, but when we look at large deals specifically that require a CapEx in the millions, whether it's $1 million, 2 million, we, under a traditional lease, they're not getting repaid on that CapEx. The only repayment they're getting is based on that lease. It's covering operating expenses for the building, and then there's extra cash. When we structure the partnership deal, the first out priority is the CapEx.
I know. I feel like we can't say that too many times, because I even forget that sometimes about how important it is.
It is. It is.
That's for the mindset of the landlord. It's like, look, the whole goal is we're paying you back first for that build out, and the landlord's financing it. The landlord's the bank, but they get paid back. So for the operator, again, there are trade-offs, which we talk a lot about in the course, but exactly. Whereas in a traditional lease, it might be 5 years before or more, before that's even paid back and they're cash flowing.
Right. Now, granted, you also have to remember that's all predicated on the revenues that are being generated within the flex office space.
Right. It has to work. Yes.
Yeah. So it has to work. But look, if you can accommodate that financial risk that the landlord is willing, because when we do a management deal, we're basically putting 100% of the financial risk on the landlord.
Yep.
So there's got to be some give and take. And that's what does it. That's what wins them over. I mean, you want to show that premium above and beyond the market rents, whatever that is. But look, your lease up time period, that's a situation where the landlord doesn't have to give up free rent. In a lot of cases today in these urban core markets, we're reading about how the leasing activity has increased. Well, if you're a tenant and you have all the leverage, why wouldn't the increased activity occur? It should occur. I mean, the pendulum swung, in 2018 and 2019, when flex operators were signing leases at unprecedented levels. They're not doing that now.
Yeah.
So the pendulum has shifted back to the tenant. So, this is where we said sometimes it might be beneficial for the operator to sign a lease, but, that lease comes with a lot of risk to it. But if you can demonstrate with the landlord that you can overachieve rents, it makes perfect sense for operators to consider that, just because of the risk and what has transpired over the last 18 months.
Or again, the hybrid of, I'm going to lease some space and then I'm going to get creative and go partner with the landlord to expand in the building.
Yep.
Which totally. I think maybe is kind of one of the fun things that's happening. You know what I wonder too, we talk about, you mentioned Bozeman, Montana. How much commercial real estate is in Bozeman? Like, can you take down 20,000 square feet, or would you even want to? I feel like that's a challenge in smaller markets, is like people want to live there and they want to be a part of the community and they want to go work downtown in Bozeman. But can I find commercial real estate in Bozeman?
it's all about the demographics. It's looking at what's the income levels, what's the daytime population and the needs, who's there. If people left New York City and they moved to Bozeman, look, we've seen this surge for flex up in the upstate New York area, whether it's in Troy or Albany. I mean, who would have thought that years ago? But
So I have a new member of the startup school who sent me pictures. He bought this 1890 mansion,
yeah,
like on the water. It must be the Hudson River. I
could
didn't,
be.
maybe I'd have to look again, but stunning, not huge, but it was like, and this is the other thing that I think is interesting about landlords, because I think sometimes we talked about, and I was this way, like I didn't want to talk to my landlord because I just wanted to pay the rent. I'm going to put all my focus in to be able to pay the rent. And I found him to be intimidating. But the thing about landlords is there's a lot of them who have the same whys that we do. I mentioned this small developer group that I presented to, and I was just so blown away. They're all real estate developers, smaller real estate developers. They're not building the targets and the things that you did in the day, but they want to do flex because they think it's an important part of the neighborhood. It's like they want it to be there. And I think the trick there is like, okay, for a management agreement, I don't know if you can get enough space to make the management agreement model work. But there's something there. And those landlords want the community piece of it. Like it's bigger than just getting a long-term lease for them. And I think there's more of those people than we think. And it's a matter of how do we find them to partner with them.
I totally agree, because like the group up in Albany, like that, this is almost like their way to give back to the community.
Yeah.
It's great. It's great. It's awesome.
Yeah. And I mean, they're not doing it, like they're not losing money on it, but it's it's like a legacy. It's like this.
It is.
Yeah. I was kind of like really blown away. Like, oh, there's a lot of people who, and Jim Hyde's going to be on the podcast, but I would put a pre-pitch in for go to your local ULI chapter and see what those people are up to. Cause they're some of the folks that really care about, and ULI is Urban Land Institute, like creating the 15-minute city. Like that's their ethos.
Yep. No, there's a lot of it out there on a very small and limited scale. And I think when people want to take the time and effort to educate themselves and understand the business model, I think more opportunities will open up. It's really about taking the time to understand the business model, because this is when operators make that decision. Do I want to do it, or do I feel more comfortable engaging an operator to do it? And we're seeing this, this whole picture. Landlords want to do it, they're not sure how to do it. There's a lot of different aspects that they might not have the resources in-house. And so, sometimes they'll start off with an operator. That operator will educate them, and then they find a way to exit out of them so they can create their own brand.
Okay, Michael, anything else happening in the market that we need to talk about before we wrap up?
No, I think that's it.
That's it
we
for now.
We said a lot.
We did say a lot. Okay, well, thank you for sharing you have a lot of eyes and ears on the market and what's happening. So I always love to hear your insight and perspective. Thank you for coming on again and sharing what's going on out there.
Thank you, Jamie. Always a pleasure.